In this video, I'll be talking about the carbon cycle in the Earth system. Now, the cycling of carbon, or C, involves chemical transformation, which is in contrast with the cycling of water, or H2O. Now, this cycle is very important to the climate because of the two greenhouse gases, which are the carbon dioxide and the methane, or CO2 and CH4 respectively. And the common units to denote the amount of carbon there is in the Earth system is the gigatons of carbon, or GTC. Now, on the table shows the reservoir of carbon, and the reservoirs of carbon are the atmospheric carbon dioxide, the atmospheric methane, the green part of the biosphere, or the leafy plants. There's also the tree trunks and roots, which has a large amount of carbon in it. There's also carbon in the soils and sediments, fossil fuels, and so on, until the inorganic carbon in sedimentary rocks. Of interest is the amount of mass per area of these reservoir of carbon. The amount of mass of atmospheric carbon dioxide is 1.6 kilograms per meter square, and the amount of methane in the atmosphere is 0.02 kilograms per meter square. And you can compare this with very large amounts of carbon in other reservoirs, such as the organic carbon in the sedimentary rocks, which is about 20,000 kilograms per meter square, and the highest or the largest reservoir in the Earth system, which is the inorganic carbon in the sedimentary rocks, in the range of 80,000 kilograms per meter square. Also, pay attention to the residence time of each reservoir of carbon, which also elucidates the exchange rate of the carbon between the reservoirs. So atmospheric carbon dioxide has a residence time of 10 years. That means the exchange rate between a molecule of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere of other reservoirs is in the order of 10 years. Methane is slightly lower. This is due to the chemical activity of these two chemicals, of these two gases. And we look at the amount of carbon in the sedimentary rocks, which is very high and has a very large residence time of about 10 to the power of 8 years. This is how carbon cycle through the different Earth systems. From the atmosphere and oceans, it goes into the biosphere, or the living organisms, or the living sphere, through photosynthesis, and the biosphere releases carbon into the atmosphere and oceans through respiration and decay. And carbon moves from biosphere to the crust through burial, and from the crust to the mantle through the process subduction, while from the mantle to the crust through the process seafloor spreading. The crust also experiences weathering, which releases carbon back into the atmosphere and ocean, and the carbon that is in the mantle goes back into the atmosphere and oceans through volcanism. The dominant gas that contains carbon in the atmosphere is the carbon dioxide, and part of the reason why it's is in a large amount in the atmosphere is because the fact that it is inert. It doesn't react as much, so that makes it varies less in the atmosphere between geographical areas in the order of 1%. Now, the other gas that contains carbon that is dominant in the atmosphere is the methane, but it varies more in the atmosphere because it is chemically active. Plus, the residence time of methane is shorter than carbon dioxide, which hints at its chemical activity. Methane comes from natural gas leaks due to anthropogenic activities or human-related activities, as well as anaerobic reactions. The carbon passes between the atmosphere and the biosphere through the process photosynthesis, and this process stores carbon in the organic molecules of the living organisms, such as in the oceans, the phytoplankton, and the leafy plants for the terrestrial biosphere. Carbon can be put back into the atmosphere through the decay and respiration of these organisms. Now, we can use satellites to measure the rate of photosynthesis by measuring the amount of light that is reflected, or the intensity of the reflected radiation, because photosynthesis uses very specific wavelength, which is the color blue and the color orange at the wavelength of 0.43 and 0.66 micrometers. Now, the rate of photosynthetic activity is called the net primary productivity, or NPP, and the biosphere is only capable of storing 10% of the atmospheric carbon at any given time. So that means if there is an increase of carbon in the atmosphere through anthropogenic activities, for example, it is only able to store 10% of that carbon that's released, or the total carbon in the atmosphere. Now this map shows the net primary productivity of different areas of the globe, which includes land and oceanic surfaces. We can see in areas of upwelling where there's many nutrients and also phytoplankton, the net primary productivity is high. And in the oceans where there is less upwelling and nutrients, then the net primary productivity is low. We can also see the net primary productivity at the coast that is also high because of upwelling and the high amounts of nutrients at the coast. But the net primary productivity or the NPP in overland is much higher compared to the oceans because of the activity of the plants on the surface. Now we look at the marine biosphere, which we saw in the previous map. The marine biosphere dissolves carbon dioxide in the euphotic zone, and it sends this dissolved carbon dioxide into the deep layers of the ocean through the processes, the photosynthetic processes of the marine organisms that utilize the carbon dioxide, and when it decays, it sinks it to the bottom of the ocean. And the sinking of the carbon due to gravity into the deep layers is called the biological pump. But in regions where, or the anoxic regions of where there's low oxygen, that means there's less respiration or decay, then a larger amount of the organic debris that's formed because of the photosynthetic activity would be higher, and that high amount will settle at the bottom of the ocean, and this forms the organic carbon reservoir. Now, carbon in the oceans exists in three main forms. There's the dissolved carbon dioxide, or the H2CO3 or carbonic acid. Then there's the carbonic ions, which can pair with metal ions, calcium and magnesium. And there's the bicarbonate ions, or the HCO3 -1 ion. The dissolved carbon dioxide concentration in the ocean equilibrates in the atmosphere through these three chemical equations. We have carbon dioxide that reacts with water, and this produces the carbonic acid, and this reaction is reversible. And the carbonic acid would dissociate in water to form hydrogen ions and the carbonate ions. And this carbonate ions would further dissociate to form this carbonate ion, CO3 2-. Now this one can combine with calcium and magnesium ions, which can form the limestone deposits and effectively storing the carbon at the bottom of the ocean. Now the ability of the ocean to take and buffer, or to store carbon dioxide or to regulate carbon dioxide, depends on the availability of the metal ions in the ocean, specifically the calcium ions. And this calcium ions are supplied into the ocean through surface runoffs. The carbonate that's created from the combination of carbonate ions with the metal ions will settle to the ocean floor to form the limestone deposits. And these limestones would tend to be concentrated at the continental shelves, or areas of the oceans that are shallow. There'll be more limestones in these continental shelves in areas of shallow tropical seas.